I thought my brother just didn't understand what it meant to raise a child with special needs. I never imagined he'd go so far as to try and take my daughter away from me. When Child Protective Services showed up at my door, everything I loved was on the line, and the person behind it was the last one I ever expected. What happened in court changed everything for our family, and gave my daughter the chance to speak the words I'll never forget. Will the truth come out before it's too late? Watch the full story. I've never liked asking for help. But with Ella, I had no choice but to become both fortress and featherbed. My daughter is 9 years old and has cerebral palsy. She can't speak in full sentences, and she walks with the help of a specialized gait trainer. Some days her little body betrays her, stiff muscles, drooling, exhaustion. But that mind of hers? Sharp. Sensitive. Always watching. I work from home doing medical transcription, squeezing every dollar out of each hour I can while making sure Ella has everything she needs, from speech therapy to playtime to just sitting in the sunlight with her favorite picture books. We have a good rhythm, the two of us. Her pediatrician says she's made huge strides. Her school's IEP team calls me involved to a fault. But outside of that, support is minimal. My brother Greg is the complete opposite of me. Corporate shark. Fancy suits. No kids, no patience. We've barely spoken since my divorce, and honestly, I was fine keeping it that way. Greg always looked at Ella like she was a problem I refused to fix. At family dinners, he tossed snide comments like, "Maybe if she had tougher boundaries, she'd talk more." Or, "Is she even trying to walk on her own yet?" I stopped bringing her around unless I had to. So when he called out of the blue and invited us to a family reconnection weekend at a rented lake house, I was stunned. "It's time to make things right," he said. "Let Ella see her cousins. We're all trying to be better." I almost said no. But Ella had been begging to swim this summer, and I didn't have the budget for a vacation. The photos of the house were beautiful: big wraparound deck, private lake access, adaptive bathroom on the first floor. And if nothing else, I figured it would be a change of scenery for her. So I said yes. We arrived on a Friday. Greg greeted us with a stiff hug and a comment about how Ella looked bigger than last time. Like she was a dog he hadn't seen in years. She clung to my hand the whole time. The cousins were kind enough, if distracted. I kept close to Ella while she explored with her gait trainer, carefully guiding her around the gravel paths and grassy hills. I barely took my eyes off her. Still, I could feel Greg watching us. Judging. His wife, Julia, barely said a word to me. On Saturday, Ella had a tough morning: tight muscles, drooling, sensory overload from the lake sounds. I helped her through it, stayed patient, skipped breakfast to massage her legs. By lunch, she was calm again. I sat her on the shaded deck in her secure seat, while I stepped inside to grab her meds. 90 seconds. That's all it took. When I came back, she was giggling at a squirrel on the railing. I smiled, kissed her head, and thought nothing of it. I didn't notice Greg standing just inside the glass door, holding his phone like a loaded weapon. That night, after the kids went to bed, Greg cornered me in the kitchen. No one else around. "She could have fallen," he hissed. "You left her out there. Alone. You're not capable of handling her." I stared at him, stunned. It was less than 2 minutes. I could see her through the window. "You're delusional," he snapped. "She belongs in a facility. Somewhere safe." I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't just a cruel opinion. It was a threat. And I had no idea how real that threat would become. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside Ella in our shared room, listening to the rise and fall of her breath, her little fingers curling around mine even in her dreams. My mind raced. Greg's words kept looping in my head like some broken cassette: "She belongs in a facility." I kept trying to convince myself it was just bluster, that he was being an arrogant jerk like always. But the way he said it, it felt rehearsed. The next morning, I packed our things before breakfast. Told the others Ella wasn't feeling well and we were heading home early. Greg barely looked up from his coffee. Hope she gets the help she needs, he muttered. Something was wrong. I could feel it. That Sunday night, I started checking Ella's medical supplies, double-checking everything. I documented her sleep schedule, started taking photos of her meals, her therapies, everything. I didn't know what I was protecting us from exactly, but I knew something was coming. 3 days later it did. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was pureeing carrots for Ella when I saw the car pull into my driveway. A white sedan with the state seal on the side. 2 women stepped out. One older, with a clipboard. One younger, carrying a file. Their faces weren't cruel, but they weren't friendly either. "Rachel Morgan?" the older one asked. "We're here from Child Protective Services. We received a report regarding your daughter, Ella." My hands went numb. The younger one said calmly, "We're here to assess some claims made about potential medical neglect and unsafe conditions. May we come in?" Ella was watching cartoons, completely unaware. I nodded numbly and let them inside. The report was 5 pages long. I wasn't allowed to read it in full, but they summarized the key accusations: frequent abandonment, refusal to comply with physical therapy recommendations, dangerous home modifications, lack of supervision leading to safety hazards. It felt like someone had described another mother entirely. Some cruel, negligent woman who let her child rot in a corner. I could hardly breathe. "These are lies," I whispered. The older woman nodded. "That's what we're here to determine." I walked them through the house. Showed Ella's therapy area. Her safety rails, her medical records binder. They asked to see her feeding equipment, her gait trainer, even her toileting routine. They spoke to Ella, gently, and noted how she lit up when I helped her communicate with her picture board. By the end of the visit, they said they weren't removing her, yet. But a formal investigation had been opened. They'd be back in 3 days for a full inspection. If anything seemed off, they could petition for temporary placement. Temporary placement. The words echoed in my skull long after they left. I sat down and pulled Ella onto my lap. She looked up at me, puzzled, and reached for my face. I smiled even though my hands were shaking. "We're okay, baby. I promise." But I wasn't sure it was true. I had no concrete proof Greg was behind this. But I knew. That picture on the deck, he staged it. And twisted it. But how could I prove it? How do you fight a lie that's already been filed in an official report? I called Ella's pediatrician and left a voicemail explaining what happened. I started gathering everything I had: notes, emails, video clips. I even dug through the footage on our front door cam in case CPS came back unannounced. That night, I got a voicemail from Greg. Calm. Polished. Like he was reading from a script. "Hey Ratch. Just checking in. I heard something might have happened with Ella. If you ever need help making some tough decisions, just know I'm here. Sometimes the hardest thing to see is when we're hurting the ones we love. Call me." I played it twice. He wasn't even pretending anymore. Those 3 days before the CPS follow-up felt like living on a minefield. Every time Ella coughed, I panicked. Every minute she was out of my sight, I pictured CPS agents bursting through the door. I kept my phone on me at all times, recording everything: our routines, our play, even her bedtime stories. I hoped it would be enough. On Thursday morning, I called in sick to work and spent hours cleaning, documenting, labeling. I reached out to anyone who might help: Ella's school aide, her speech therapist, even our neighbor, Lisa, who was a nurse. I begged them to write letters or be willing to speak if someone asked. Most said yes immediately. They'd seen me juggle everything. They knew the truth. Still, I felt exposed. Like Greg's lies were shadows, stretching across every room in my house. When the CPS worker returned, this time with a camera and a different partner, I was ready. I'd lined the hallways with photos of Ella at therapy, smiling at her adapted bike, building towers of blocks. I showed them her logbook, every appointment documented down to the day and hour. Ella's therapist had sent a video clip explaining how Ella communicates, how I track her progress, how invested I am. But there was something in the CPS worker's tone that made me realize how high the stakes were. We're here to verify Ella's environment and your parenting. Not just today, but as a pattern. If we see red flags, or if evidence is unclear, Ella may be removed for her own safety. Removed. For her own safety. It didn't matter that the report was full of distortions. The burden was on me to prove the truth. If I slipped up, if Ella had a meltdown, if my voice shook, it could be used against us. I hated that Greg had this kind of power, even for a moment. They walked through every room. Checked for unlocked meds, hot water hazards, loose rails. I showed them Ella's therapy progress logs, our appointment calendar, the stash of her favorite books in every room. Ella sat in her adapted chair, humming, blissfully unaware of the tension. When they asked her questions, she used her picture board to answer. Mama. Happy. Book. Outside. The younger CPS worker smiled at her, but the older one kept scribbling notes. Before they left, I asked if they could tell me who made the report. Of course, they couldn't. It's confidential, they said, but the wording matched everything Greg had accused me of at the lake house. Even his phrasing. Frequent abandonment. Enabling. I saw his fingerprints everywhere. After they left, I collapsed onto the kitchen floor and sobbed, the kind of ugly crying I'd never let Ella see. I felt helpless, angry, and betrayed. I'd spent my entire adult life fighting for my daughter, her rights, her dignity, her future. Now my own brother had painted me as a monster. Lisa, my neighbor, knocked softly a few minutes later. She'd seen the CPS car leave. Without asking, she sat down beside me. Rachel, you're a good mom. I'll tell anyone who asks. She hugged me tight. For the first time all week, I let myself believe we might have a chance. That night, I emailed every document I had to a lawyer recommended by the therapist. I had no savings for a legal fight, but I'd sell everything if I had to. If it was Greg's word against mine, I needed every ounce of proof on my side. Before bed, I tucked Ella in and watched her drift off, fingers curled around her favorite stuffed bunny. I promised her out loud, I'm not going to let anyone take you. Not now, not ever. But as I lay there in the dark, dread crept in. Because I knew Greg wasn't done. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a sense of dread so heavy I could barely move. The world outside was bright, birds chirping, but inside everything felt gray and suspended, like time itself was holding its breath. I couldn't eat. I could barely drink coffee. All I could do was cycle through my mental checklist over and over: therapy notes, emails, medication logs, letters from Ella's care team. Everything in order, everything ready for inspection, but it never felt like enough. Ella, as always, was my anchor. She woke up giggling, her hair tangled, patting my face with her little palm. Mama, she said, her voice soft but certain. I nearly broke down right then. How could anyone believe I'd ever hurt her? The injustice was suffocating. I spent hours calling every support person we'd ever worked with. I left messages with Ella's pediatrician, begging for a letter to clarify my dedication and competence. Her speech therapist sent a video that same day, demonstrating how I prompt and support Ella's communication. The school's IEP coordinator wrote a detailed email, documenting every instance of my advocacy and care. Even the district physical therapist offered to testify if needed. But my mind kept returning to Greg. I replayed our entire relationship, every moment of distance, every cold remark. I remembered holidays where he'd stare at Ella, lips thin, pretending not to notice her struggling with a fork. His ex-wife, Sandra, once pulled me aside and whispered, "He wasn't always this hard. But Greg doesn't like what he can't control." I couldn't call Sandra. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. I got an anonymous email. The subject line was blank. The body was a single sentence. "You're not crazy. He's done this before." Attached were screenshots of text messages, and I recognized Sandra's number. My hand shook as I read the messages. Greg. Rachel can't handle that kid. I'm getting CPS to fix it. Sandra. This is low, Greg. Greg. She'll thank me one day. Ella belongs somewhere safe. Rachel's too soft. Attached were more messages, spanning weeks, all with Greg bragging to Sandra about his plan. He'd told her exactly how he'd set up the lake house scene. He'd even mentioned photoshopping timestamps on the picture he took of Ella alone, claiming she'd been unsupervised for over half an hour. I felt sick. Part of me wanted to scream, part of me wanted to collapse. But I forwarded everything to my lawyer without hesitation. This was proof. Finally, something tangible that connected Greg to the report. Something to show the judge that this wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a calculated attack. My lawyer called me an hour later, breathless. This is gold, Rachel. I can subpoena Sandra for more testimony if needed. But keep this quiet until the hearing. Greg can't know you have it yet. That afternoon, I sat down and wrote a statement, from start to finish, about what really happened at the lake house, every detail, every feeling. I included timestamps from my phone, the messages from my neighbor Lisa, the letters from Ella's care team. I attached Sandra's emails. I organized every document into folders, color-coded by source. By the time I was done, it was almost midnight. Ella was already asleep, her favorite bunny tucked beside her. I watched her for a while, feeling a strange mix of hope and heartbreak. I kissed her forehead, whispered, "We're going to get through this." For the first time in days, I almost believed it. The week leading up to the hearing crawled by in slow, torturous hours. CPS called to schedule one last home visit, and even though I knew I had the evidence, I still woke up every morning afraid I'd find a stranger at my door with papers to remove Ella. I felt exposed, like my every move was being watched, judged, written down for someone else to interpret. My lawyer was calm but firm. Greg will show up with whatever he thinks makes him look credible. Just stick to the facts. We'll let his own words sink him. I sent copies of Sandra's texts, the video from the speech therapist, all the letters and logs I'd gathered. The pile of evidence grew until I'd barely recognized my own life in the files. Ella was the only constant. Every night, I tried to act normal, reading her books, playing music, helping her with her art. But she knew I was upset. On Thursday, she sat beside me at the table, her eyes searching mine. She reached for her picture board and slowly tapped out. Sad? Mama. Why? I tried to smile, blinking back tears. Just a lot of big feelings, sweetheart. I'm here. You're safe. She nodded, as if she understood more than I could say. On Friday, my lawyer called. Rachel, we got lucky. Sandra's agreed to testify by video if necessary. She said Greg did the same thing to her after their divorce, tried to claim she was an unfit parent, manipulated reports, even threatened to fix her custody situation if she didn't cooperate. She's willing to say it under oath. I felt a rush of relief and guilt. Relief that I wasn't crazy, that someone else had seen Greg's manipulations up close. Guilt that Sandra, too, had been wounded by his schemes. What if he brings photos? I asked. The picture from the lake house? Let him, my lawyer replied. We have the originals and the metadata from your phone. He can't fake timestamps if we show the real thing. The judge will see through it. Still, the night before the hearing, I barely slept. I kept picturing Greg, standing in front of the judge, that cold smile on his face, insisting he was just worried for Ella's safety. I imagined him presenting those doctored photos, acting like the hero while painting me as neglectful. I wanted to believe it would all work out, but doubt gnawed at me. I kept replaying that day at the lake house, how carefully I'd watched Ella, how quick I'd been to get her meds, how Greg's eyes followed me like a hawk. He'd been planning this all along. Not out of genuine concern, but out of spite. Out of some twisted need to control a situation he never understood. The morning of the hearing, I dressed Ella in her favorite purple dress. She smiled and squeezed my hand as we waited for our ride. My lawyer met us at the courthouse steps, folder in hand, voice calm and reassuring. We're going to tell the truth. That's all we can do. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than I'd expected. Greg sat with his lawyer, arms folded, eyes flicking to me with a look I'd seen before, the look of a man convinced he was untouchable. For a moment I faltered. But then I looked down at Ella, at the way she held her bunny tight, and I remembered what I was fighting for. When the judge entered, everything in my life came down to what happened next. The hearing itself felt like standing in the path of a storm, powerless to stop what was coming but determined not to be swept away. My hands shook as I took the stand, but I forced myself to breathe, to look at the judge, to speak clearly. My lawyer started by presenting the timeline from the lake house, the original photos from my phone, the timestamped text to Lisa, the therapy log that documented every minute of that weekend. Piece by piece, she built a portrait of diligence, care, and fierce love. Greg's lawyer tried to object. He slid copies of the lake house photo across the table, blown up and distorted, claiming Ella had been abandoned on the deck for 30 minutes. But my lawyer calmly asked the judge to examine the metadata from my phone. The judge scrolled through the originals, noting that less than 2 minutes had passed between photos. Then came the letters, the pediatrician's note about Ella's excellent care, the speech therapist's video, Lisa's testimony about seeing me with Ella nearly every hour of every day. The IEP coordinator even called in to confirm my dedication. Every witness undermined Greg's claim. Every fact chipped away at his narrative. But it was Sandra's evidence that changed everything. On a video call, Sandra told the judge about Greg's past, the way he manipulated custody during their divorce, his threats, his history of weaponizing the system when he didn't get his way. She confirmed that the screenshots and texts were real. She explained how Greg had bragged about getting Ella placed somewhere safe, and had laughed about teaching Rachel a lesson. The courtroom went silent as the judge read the transcripts. Greg fidgeted, his composure slipping. Then the CPS worker took the stand. She explained the home visits, how she'd found no evidence of neglect or unsafe conditions. Ella's needs are complex, she said, but Rachel has made every reasonable effort. I saw no grounds for removal. Greg tried one last desperate move, producing a timeline of alleged incidents, but my lawyer pointed out the inconsistencies, the lack of witnesses, the contradictions in Greg's story compared to everyone else's. In the end, the judge turned to Greg, her face unreadable. It's clear to me, she said, that the allegations were not only unfounded but motivated by personal animosity. Rachel, you have demonstrated extraordinary dedication to your daughter. Greg, your actions have put this child and her mother through unnecessary trauma. This court does not tolerate false reporting. I felt tears burning in my eyes, relief and rage and exhaustion all swirling at once. The judge ordered the case closed, recommended voluntary family support for me and Ella, and instructed CPS to file a formal complaint against Greg for malicious reporting. It was over. I reached for Ella's hand. She smiled, as if she'd known all along. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. After the verdict, I walked out of the courthouse feeling like I'd aged a decade. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the fatigue. I wanted to collapse, to cry, to scream, but most of all, I just wanted to go home and be with Ella. Greg tried to approach me outside, his voice low and desperate. Rachel, you know I was just trying to do what's best. I cut him off with a look. There was nothing left to say. The judge's words still rang in my ears, echoing over the weeks of doubt and fear. This court does not tolerate false reporting. Back at home, Lisa came over with a homemade casserole. She hugged us both, told Ella how brave she'd been, and promised to keep an extra eye out from now on. That small gesture, after everything, meant more than I could express. In the following days, something shifted with my extended family. A few aunts called to apologize for ever doubting me. My mom sent a text, her first in months. I'm sorry. I want to be there for you and Ella. Even Julia, Greg's wife, reached out quietly, asking if Ella needed any books or toys. I accepted their apologies, but set my boundaries. I was done trying to prove myself to people who hadn't believed in us when it mattered. CPS sent a follow-up letter recommending family support services, therapy, respite, after-school programs. I said yes to everything that might help Ella thrive. The social worker told me, "You're the kind of parent we wish every child had." I cried for a long time after that. For the first time, I felt seen. 6 months later, I took Ella on our own little vacation. Just us. We found a quiet cottage by a different lake, a place with no ghosts, no family drama, just sunlight and peace. I watched her in the water, safe in her float vest, laughing as the wind tangled her hair. She'd come so far. We both had. That last night, as I tucked her into bed, Ella looked at me, her words slow but clear. "You're my hero, Mama!" I broke. I held her tight and whispered back, "You're mine!" I don't know what the future holds. I know there will always be challenges, big ones. But I also know this: no one will ever come between me and my daughter again.